Breaking now at 6.
This election has been tainted.
We're on your side with major developments in an election fraud investigation.
She just said that she was here to pick up my ballot.
Tonight, we've uncovered a second reported plan to pay people to illegally collect unsealed ballots.
These allegations are incredibly serious.
Only WBTV has exclusive new information in this ongoing investigation into voting irregularities in the 9th Congressional District race between Mark Harris and Dan McCready.
The State Board of Elections has refused to certify the results of that race. And today, WBTV's investigative reporter Nick Oxner obtained a new document showing there may be multiple efforts to illegally collect those unsealed absentee ballots and pay people for them. Nick is live now in Bladen County, walking us through what he's uncovered. Nick?
Yeah, Maureen, Paul, up until today, the scrutiny over these irregularities with absentee ballots had really been placed on one guy who is paid by a consultant for the Mark Harris campaign to collect these absentee ballots here in Bladen County. But this page of handwritten notes that I obtained today shows that there's a second operation to collect these unsealed absentee ballots in exchange for cash. Picking up existing ballots unsealed. That's what's written and underlined at the top of this page of handwritten notes obtained by WBTV. Two sources who provided the notes say they were left behind after a meeting of campaign workers in early April and made by a man named Jeff Smith, a local businessman and elected official who supported Bill Ward, who was challenging the incumbent sheriff in the Republican primary.
Superior Court is an expensive endeavor.
Smith has had a long-running feud with the Bladen County Sheriff stemming from his ownership of a sweepstakes parlor. But his notes, which were also reviewed by Bladen County Commissioner Ray Britt, suggest he was getting paid to collect ballots for Ward. $500 for 150 unsealed ballots, $1,000 for 250. In a text message, Smith said he never had an arrangement with Ward, but didn't directly respond when a reporter sent this picture of the notes. Similarly, Ward said he had no knowledge of any absentee ballot collection operation. Now, also today, I was able to confirm that the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and the Wake County District Attorney have had a criminal investigation into voting irregularities here in Bladen County, dating all the way back to January of 2017. Now, I specifically asked the District Attorney there in Wake County this afternoon if there was one target or multiple targets of that criminal investigation. She said there were several potential targets of the criminal investigation. She wouldn't give me any names just yet. For now, reporting live in Bladen County, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Nick, late this afternoon, the State Board of Elections announced it would begin releasing some documents related to the ongoing investigation of voting irregularities. Some of those documents were just posted. One of them is this record. It shows the number of in-person delivery of absentee ballot request forms. Records show McCrae Dowless requested more than 580 ballots. We're analyzing those documents right now. We'll be updating you more as we learn more. WBTV is committed to hunting down new information in this story. As the investigation unfolds, we will update you both on air and on WBTV.com. North Carolina's 9th Congressional District race is in limbo because of irregularities with absentee ballots. And now WBTV has uncovered evidence election officials in Bladen County first started raising questions about irregularities with absentee ballots as far back as 2010. Documents obtained only by WBTV show the then chairman and executive director of the County Board of Elections sent information about the possible irregularities to the State Board of Elections. But tonight, the board chairman who reported those concerns tells WBTV investigative reporter Nick Oxner that nothing ever happened. Nick is live tonight in Bladen County with more on what he uncovered. Nick?
Yeah, Paul, specifically those concerns in 2010 centered on a block of votes that were cast from a nursing home where many of the voters had never previously voted. Those concerns were raised by a man named Ray Britt. Today, he tells me that all of today's problems and uncertainty may not have happened had investigators taken his concerns seriously 8 years ago.
It's frustrating.
Bladen County Commissioner Ray Britt wishes state investigators had taken him seriously in 2010 when he questioned a group of absentee ballots cast in that year's election.
Your citizens look for you to be accountable for them because they're aware of these things going on, but you're doing your job and you submit it to no avail.
We obtained these documents, which were still in a safe at the Bladen County Board of Elections Wednesday, which show county staff sent materials to the state, but Britt says nothing was ever done.
All that is not right and you shouldn't do it, and that's against the law. And all these things are reported.
Do you think some of this could have been prevented had the state board started investigating 8 years ago when you first tried to sound the alarm?
Oh, without a doubt.
Now, I just got off the phone with the spokesman for the State Board of Elections about 10 minutes ago. He issued a brief statement in response to our questions about why this was never investigated. The statement points out in part that the chairman and executive director of the State Board of Elections in 2010 are no longer with the agency. The spokesman also pointed out that the State Board of Elections has referred numerous cases of voter irregularities to state and federal prosecutors in the last few years. He also said the Board of Elections director, as well as its 4 investigators and other staff, are in the 9th Congressional District, including here in Bladen County right now, taking these current irregularities very seriously. For now, reporting live in Bladen County, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Nick, thank you. Tonight, some Democrat congressional leaders are calling for a hearing in this District 9 race. Virginia Representative Jerry Conley, who is the vice-ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, says in a statement, quote, "Votes have been stolen by preying on senior and minority voters, and now a cloud of doubt and suspicion hangs over this election result. It is incumbent on Chairman Gowdy to hold an emergency hearing before the end of this congressional session so that we can shed light and understand what happened in this race." Tonight, top Republican lawmakers call for a nonpartisan investigation into allegations of voter irregularities and election fraud in North Carolina's 9th District. In the election between Mark Harris and Dan McCready, only 905 votes separated them. Harris declared victory, but the State Board of Elections refused to certify the results as it investigates possible fraud involving absentee ballots. Tonight, Dan McCready withdrew his concession. Now, until now, the allegations focused on Republicans, but now we have uncovered information showing Democrats are tied to a different organization in Bladen County that had a similar absentee ballot operation ongoing. Investigative reporter Nick Oxner broke the story earlier tonight. He is live in Bladen County. So, Nick, I know you talked to voters who cast their votes, but there's something funny about the absentee signatures.
Yeah, Paul, I spoke with Shirley and her husband, Melvin, this evening. They live in Bladen County, and they tell me they decided to vote after a woman with the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC asked them to request absentee ballots. Records show that PAC was funded at least in part by the state Democratic Party.
The young lady, she come because we were saying that we don't vote. Well, then she said, well, you can do it like this right here.
That's how Raymond Melvin says he and his wife came to cast absentee ballots in the 2018 election. Melvin says a woman helped them request an absentee ballot and then came back from the PAC after they arrived in the mail.
They came back and made sure that we filled it out right. And then they mailed it off.
Melvin said he made his choices, sealed the ballot, and gave it to the woman. The ballot covers show the votes were witnessed by a woman named Lola Wooten, who campaign finance records show was paid by the PAC to get out the vote. But Melvin says only one woman witnessed them vote. State law requires 2. The second signature on the Melvin's 2 ballots are from 2 different people, despite the fact that they filled their ballots out at the same time.
They made it convenient, made it easy.
And you wouldn't have voted had they not come and brought you the form?
No.
Now, I called a number for Lola Wooten yesterday, spoke with someone who told me she'd call me right back. That was yesterday. Still haven't heard from her. Called her again tonight. Went to a voicemail that wasn't set up. Similarly, tried to call a number listed for Monroe in public records. One of the women who was a second witness signature, couldn't get a hold of her. Similarly, I emailed earlier this evening a spokesman for the state Democratic Party requesting comment for what we've uncovered. Have not heard back. For now, reporting live in Bladen County, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
I know you'll stay on the story, Nick, and WBTV is committed to following the story as the investigation unfolds. We'll update you both on air and on WBTV.com as we learn new information.
A WBTV investigation uncovering new developments in the election fraud investigation that is holding a major congressional race in limbo. Tonight, we are questioning one of the groups accused of illegally collecting absentee ballots. And this comes as the leads of both political parties, leaders, I should say, are calling for a new election between Dan McCready and Mark Harris.
And our chief investigative reporter, Nick Oxner, took his questions straight to the North Carolina Democratic Party's chair today in Raleigh. which is where he joins us now with more.
Yeah, Paul, Maureen, we first told you last week about a group called the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC. We know it's been funded, at least in part, by the state Democratic Party. We also know 2 people paid by that PAC had witnessed more than 100 absentee ballots in this year's election, some in ways that potentially violated the law. Well, today, when I went to a press conference in Raleigh to ask the chairman of the Democratic Party about that, he still was short on explanations.
From what we know, the Bladen County Improvement Association has done lawful work in the community and has ensured that vulnerable populations have the opportunity to make their voices heard.
That's what North Carolina Democratic Party Chairman Wayne Goodwin said at a press conference Tuesday when asked about the party's ties to the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC.
There are people on the record saying, 1, people paid by the Improvement Association PAC witnessed a ballot when they weren't in the home. 2, they took custody of ballots. And 3, a third voter whose ballot was witnessed by someone paid by the PAC told Politico that that employee went in and filled out their ballot however they wanted to on his behalf and cast it. At least 2 of those things are crimes. Would you say that is also wrong?
Well, we need to know more information. I mean, I'm just hearing about this for the first time from you.
We've been asking for you to comment on it for a week.
Well, again, about the Bladen County Improvement Association, there are more affidavits that are coming forward. I think it's vital for the entire process to look at the general election and for the board that is constituted now to conclude its very thorough and deliberate investigation on all these things and get to the bottom of your questions and all the others. I don't have the answers for the questions you posed because I'm not an investigator.
WBTV's done the math and found the state Democratic Party has given more than $21,000 to the group since 2010, including $6,000 total in the month before this year's election, with checks written from an account that received $100,000 from the Dan McCready campaign.
Would you say that was money well spent, the $6,000 you gave them in the month before the election?
I have no reason to question the use of the monies other than whatever needs to be done to get to the bottom of what occurred in Bladen and Robinson counties. We need to learn about what happened. I mean, I don't know the answer to your question.
For the 2018 cycle, the Bladen County Improvement Association was not involved in promoting absentee ballots.
Irving Joyner is a law professor and attorney for the Bladen County Improvement Association. He agreed to answer our questions about what we've uncovered with workers paid by the PAC after the organization's members didn't return our calls.
Those individuals who participated in that did it the right way. There was no harvesting of ballots from the absentee voter.
But when we told him the actions we'd uncovered by 2 women who were paid by the PAC this fall for Get Out the Vote efforts, he couldn't answer.
I haven't seen the records that you are referring to, nor the names of the people that were involved, as you alleged, and therefore I really can't comment on something that I have no information about. It raises concern on my part, and I'm going to inquire into it to find out what the truth of the matter is.
Now, ultimately, the fate of a new election in the 9th Congressional District would be in the hands of the State Board of Elections. We know right now they have scheduled an evidentiary hearing by December 21st. We learned last night that date could be pushed back. No word on whether or not that'll happen, though, as of yet. For now, reporting live in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Breaking her silence tonight, a woman at the center of the scandal in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District is speaking for the first time only to WBTV. At least 2 affidavits have been filed accusing Lisa Britt of illegally collecting and tampering with absentee ballots in Bladen County. She worked for a man named McCrae Dallas, who was paid by Republican Mark Harris's campaign to run a coordinated absentee ballot effort. Tonight, Britt sat down with WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner for an exclusive interview.
I'd looked Lisa Britt in the eye and specifically asked her if she'd committed any crimes in the 2018 election. She said no. She told me she's speaking out now because of what she calls lies and misinformation being spread about the work she did in this race.
There are a lot of people who want to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Because there are people who said that you've committed crimes.
Yes, sir.
What do you say to that?
I haven't committed any crimes.
Lisa Britt went door to door in Bladen and Robinson counties, encouraging people to cast absentee ballots. She's the white girl referred to in at least 2 affidavits submitted by the North Carolina Democratic Party, where voters say she took their ballots and said she'd finished filling them out.
Did you ever take someone's ballot from them?
No, sir.
Did you ever change someone's ballot?
No, no, sir.
Did you ever witness a ballot that you didn't actually see cast?
No, sir.
And people have written under oath. They've sworn affidavits under oath that said you took their ballots and you did things that could be illegal.
Yeah, I saw that too, sir, but no, that never happened.
How would you describe what you did in the 2018 election?
We basically went to areas of people who do not have a vehicle and would not actually be able to make it to the polls to vote, so that way they would have the option to vote, because we wanted to make it so everyone actually had an option to vote.
Britt hasn't spoken publicly before now, but she says she has spoken with investigators looking for evidence of voting irregularities in the 9th Congressional District.
When this goes before the Board of Elections, if this goes before prosecutors and judges, do you think you'll be exonerated?
I don't feel that I've done anything wrong.
This story has blown up.
Yes, sir. It's blown up huge.
And you're one of the people at the center of it.
Yes, sir.
What does that make you think? What goes through your head when you turn on the TV and you hear people saying, these people did something bad, and they're talking about you?
It makes, I don't even know how to explain how that makes me feel.
Now, we still have yet to hear publicly from the man that Lisa Britt worked for, McCrae Dallas, who worked directly for the Mark Harris campaign. What we do know is that investigators from the State Board of Elections, as well as the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, continued to look into things and follow leads on the ground here in Bladen and Robeson counties. For now, reporting in Bladenboro, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Well, while the investigation into election fraud continues, the agency doing the investigating is fighting for its life. A letter from the State Board of Elections chairman says if the board is dissolved, it would erode public confidence in the agency. WBTV's new investigative reporter David Hodges has more on the board's future. New for you now at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, this letter lays out the stakes for the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Chairman Josh Malcolm lays it straight, saying either they can have the time they need to do the election fraud investigation or suffer the consequences of voter mistrust. The letter was sent to a 3-judge panel that earlier today ruled the board would not dissolve until December 28th. At the same time, the legislature passed a bill that would keep the board alive until January 31st. Malcolm is asking for the judges to grant them that new deadline, saying a transition now would, quote, work against the public's interest. The board is set to dissolve after Governor Roy Cooper sued Republicans for changes they made to the board structure in 2017. We'll keep an eye out for the court's response in the days to come. In Bladenboro, David Hodges, WBTV, on your side.
WBTV has been uncovering new details in this investigation almost every single day since it broke. We will continue to press for answers and hold people accountable. You can find more on our website, WBTV.com.
You personally hired McCrae Dallas to come work for your campaign. Did you do that?
I did, and readily. It goes back to understanding the race of 2016.
So what do you think McCrae Dallas did for your campaign in 2018?
In 2018, McCrae Dallas shared with me that there was an absentee ballot program and a get out the vote program that he did. And I remember him saying specifically that they were not to take a ballot. They were not to touch a ballot. In fact, he used the illustration that I still recall, that I don't care if it's a 95-year-old woman in a wheelchair or a walker, you cannot take her ballot. You can walk her to the mailbox and put the ballot in the mailbox and raise the flag, but you don't take the ballot. So that was my understanding of what the absentee ballot program was that he was doing in 2018.
At any time, did you have any indication that McCrae Dallas was doing something that might be illegal?
No, absolutely not.
And had you had that, would you still have continued to employ him?
No, I would not have. Again, we kept emphasizing again and again that when he was describing the ballot to us, and in fact, when you get down to his description of the program, he was being vouched for by a number of other leaders down there. So, I mean, I had no reason to think that what he was doing was illegal.
Do you think there'll be a new election, or do you think you'll end up being seated as the congressman from the 9th District?
I am hopeful. I am hopeful that the investigation that's being done by the board currently will ultimately produce a report that will make it clear that the outcome would not have been changed and that they'll choose to go ahead and certify. And I believe if we're certified that I'll be seated.
Breaking news tonight in our investigation into North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. The State Board of Elections has released hundreds of pages of documents detailing what they call crimes carried out in Bladen County in the 2016 election.
Yeah, at the center of it all is a man named McCrae Dowless, who worked for Mark Harris in this year's election, which is also under a cloud. Also included is the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC, who WBTV has found also paid women who ran a coordinated absentee ballot effort this year.
We have team coverage for you tonight. David Hodges spoke with voters today, but first, let's go to Chief Investigative Reporter Nick Oxner. He is live in Bladen County with details of what these new documents reveal. 300 pages, a lot to go over, but break down the highlights.
Yeah, Maureen, we've been going over those feverishly in the last about 2 hours. That's when those records were first posted by the North Carolina State Board of Elections. And it starts with a letter that investigators at the state board sent to state and federal prosecutors just this past January, hoping to drum up enough interest and more support to conduct a criminal investigation into what the board calls potential felony crimes related to the 2016 election. Despite their pleas, we know that no criminal charges have come yet. In fact, we know that just this past January, the matter was referred to the Wake County District Attorney, a woman named Lauren Freeman, who says she has been investigating voting irregularities since this January in Bladen County. We know that she's received additional reports, new information after the primaries this year, and again, obviously, the ongoing investigation being conducted into irregularities in this year's general election from November. Now, we know there are a number of broad findings that you can outline from the documents released today. We're still going through them, but generally speaking, conclusions the State Board of Elections reached include the fact that McCrae Dowless, that man who was hired by Mark Harris for the 2018 campaign, ran a coordinated ballot effort, and investigators say that he paid people to collect ballots. Now, that conclusion is based on interviews with two people who say they were paid by Dowless to collect those ballots. The Board of Elections says that's a crime. The board also says that Dowless specifically instructed those people who worked for him on what to do and say to investigators. In fact, they say investigators were listening in on a conversation with those employees on speakerphone one day when they say Dowless tried to give them what they refer to as a story about what they did for Dowless in 2016. And finally, we know that the State Board of Elections in that cover letter also says that the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC may have improperly assisted voters in filling out some of their absentee ballots in 2016. Again, all of these allegations from 2016 involve the same parties that are at the center of things going on in the investigation in this year's election. Now, we'll continue to pour through these and bring you more information when we can. For now, reporting live in Bladen County, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Interesting. We're now hearing the word crimes. Thank you, Nick.
All right, let's talk about this year's election. The state board now in the midst of that new investigation into absentee ballot irregularities. Our team coverage continues in Bladen County with WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges. He has new insight into what state investigators are trying to figure out.
The North Carolina State Board of Elections obviously wants to talk to some of the critical figures at the center of this investigation. McCrae Dowless might have already refused an interview with them. However, investigators are talking to the everyday people of Bladen County, much like Sandra Hines. I also spoke with Hines. She told me that before the election, two people showed up at her apartment and helped her file out an absentee ballot application. Well, she ended up submitting two applications, but on one of them, she doesn't recognize the handwriting and even says her signature is not quite right. But after the election, she said she was visited by two state investigators on two separate occasions. They asked her a number of questions, including trying to get her to identify the women who helped her file an absentee ballot application.
They said, "Can I show you some pictures?" And I said, "Sure." And they asked me that I recognize anybody. And then when they showed me a couple of brunettes, I said, "I can tell you right now, neither one of them were brunette. They were both blondes." So I basically looked at the blondes, but I really couldn't tell them.
I reached out to the Board of Elections to ask about their ongoing investigation, but their spokesperson never got back to me. In Bladen County, David Hodges, WBTV, on your side.
David, thank you. We are committed to following every angle of this story as this investigation continues to develop. Stay with WBTV News for the latest updates as soon as they break. Maureen, right now, alarming allegations involving voting irregularities in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. A new incident report just uncovered by WBTV appears to allege that the head of a political action committee has been routinely collecting ballots. That is illegal. WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges is live in Bladen County tonight. So David, what did you find out here?
Well, while sifting through campaign finance documents, I found something different, an incident report form that raises new questions for us about Horace Munn. He's the president of the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC, which is the same organization that was investigated for alleged election fraud back in 2016, along with McCrae Dallas. When the top of a public record says this needs to be looked into, you can bet WBTV Investigates will try and find out why. The form is an incident report at the Bladen County Board of Elections office. A handicapped man named Charles Bennerman sent his helper to the office to tell staff that no one picked up his ballot. The problem? The State Board of Elections says it's illegal to collect absentee ballots. I tried speaking with Bennerman, but no one answered his door. But his helper told Bladen elections officials that Horace never came to get his ballot.
Maybe a procedural problem, but nothing unlawful.
This is video of Horace Munn speaking with WECT in 2016 about other allegations of election fraud. He's also the volunteer fire chief of the town of East Arcadia, where we tried to track him down. He also sits on the town council and is the president of the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC, which was previously investigated for absentee ballot irregularities in 2016. I stopped by Horace Munn's house right here to try and talk with him about our findings. His wife answered the door and said he was sick and he couldn't talk to me, said I should call the house number and leave a message. I came outside, got in my car, called that house number. He picked up. He said he was too sick for me to come inside and he wouldn't let me record our phone conversation, but I did ask some of our more important questions. When I told Munn what was in the report, he said, quote, "That's ludicrous. I don't pick up ballots." He said Mr. Bennerman was his former teacher, but that Bennerman, quote, "probably meant that no one came to assist him with his ballot and witness it." Munn is mentioned on several occasions in the 2016 Board of Elections investigation released yesterday. He's credited with forwarding complaints against Dallas McCrae to the state board, although one of the members of the Improvement PAC said Munn and McCrae used to be friends. We reported yesterday that two people associated with the Improvement PAC were previously interviewed about irregularities with absentee ballots back in 2016. And even though Munn heads this organization, his name was not anywhere near those allegations. Reporting live in Bladen County, David Hodges, WBTV.
Breaking news tonight, more revelations from Bladen County as our WBTV Investigates team continues digging for information in the 9th Congressional District race. Tonight we've uncovered new information that the Bladen County District Attorney sought information about the ongoing investigation into potential election fraud despite having a conflict of interest. Chief Investigative Reporter Nick Oxner has obtained some new documents showing the State Board of Elections was concerned about this conflict. Joins us now live in the newsroom with more. Nick?
Yeah, Jamie, District Attorney John David and his staff aggressively sought information regarding the North Carolina State Board of Elections investigation into potential voter fraud in Bladen County throughout 2017, before David recused himself this past January. But a new statement from a state board spokesman tells me their investigators were slow to share information with him out of concern he had a conflict of interest that he didn't acknowledge until this January. Bladen County District Attorney John David released dozens of pages of emails Friday afternoon detailing efforts made by senior staff in his office to learn information about the ongoing investigation into potential voting fraud in Bladen County in 2017. Specifically, the emails show his staff focus on actions of a group called the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC. Investigators were slow to respond, and a new statement from the State Board of Elections spokesman explains why. Board staff had concerns that David had a conflict of interest in being involved in the investigation at all. Although the statement doesn't specify what the conflict is, multiple sources tell WBTV David was in a romantic relationship with Bladen County Commissioner Ashley Trivett. Trivett hired a man named McCrae Dallas to work on her campaign in 2016. Dallas is a central figure in both the 2016 and 2018 fraud investigations. The emails released by David's office Friday showed David's staff had little to no interest in Dallas. just a group working on the opposite side. David didn't recuse himself until January of this year, but records obtained by WBTV show David has continued to make inquiries about the investigation as recently as this month.
Hi, Kim Strack. My name is Ashley Bullard. I'm calling from District Attorney John David's office.
That's the first message left by an assistant to Bladen County District Attorney John David on Monday of last week, seeking a meeting to discuss the ongoing investigation into voting irregularities in Bladen County.
He wanted me to call to see if you would be available today to have a conference call with him and his Chief Prosecutor Quentin McGee in the Bladen office in regards to some media public records requests we've received from the media in regards to the investigation into the Bladen County fraud issue.
In the voicemail, his assistant says David wanted to talk about the Bladen County fraud issue, even though he's recused himself from the investigation. Strack is leading the investigation on the ground in Bladen and Robeson counties. But in response to a request from WBTV, David denied trying to reach board investigators to discuss the inquiry. Instead, he said he was calling to talk about a pending public records request. He continued pushing back on our questions even after we sent him a transcript of the calls left by his office, which clearly say he hoped to talk about the investigation. Now, we learned other information today about the referral from the North Carolina State Board of Elections that it did make to prosecutors in 2017. The Associated Press obtained a letter sent by staff at the state board to federal prosecutors, forwarding them evidence of potential election fraud and warning it could happen again in future elections. Now reporting live from the newsroom, Nick Oxner, WBTV.
New tonight, more voters in Bladen County are coming forward saying they were victims of election fraud. The newest accusations of absentee ballot irregularities in the 9th District congressional race between Mark Harris and Dan McCready range from collecting ballots illegally to tossing them in the trash. All these claims are outlined in new affidavits collected by McCready's team and released by the State Board of Elections late last night. WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges has been digging through those sworn statements and even interviewed one woman who submitted an affidavit. David, why is she so concerned about this?
Well, Alex, the voter I spoke with and others claim they never requested absentee ballots, but they just showed up at their house anyways. Even worse, some voters say people came to offer to pick up their ballots. One voter even said that McCray Dallas, the man hired by Mark Harris and is at the center of this investigation, has been picking up his absentee ballot for years.
But when the absentee ballot came in, I'm like, I don't know.
Sunday night, Satire Redemar's name appeared in a batch of affidavits submitted by Dan McCready's attorneys and released by the North Carolina State Board of Elections. Just last week, she sat down with me to talk about her absentee ballot she says she never requested, but showed up at her home anyway.
You've never asked for one before?
Never, ever.
Two other people signed affidavits saying they never filled out the applications, but found copies of forged ones with their name. When I showed Redemar her application, she said it was her signature, but she had no memory of applying for a ballot and said she wouldn't because she always votes in person. Other voters made even more alarming claims, saying people offered to pick up their ballots. Those like Lisa Britt, who denied those allegations to WBTV's Nick Oxner.
Did you ever take someone's ballot from them?
No, sir.
Did you ever change someone's ballot?
No, sir.
One voter said McCray Dallas had been picking up his ballot for years. People with the most stake in the game made the strongest accusations, with Bladen County Democratic Party Chair Ben Snyder claiming he heard that McCray Dallas admitted to throwing away ballots. Former Bladen Board of Elections Vice Chair Jen Slutz said Dallas was close to the former elections director Cynthia Shaw and that she failed to report absentee ballot irregularities to the state, instead talking about it with Dallas. Everyone who signed an affidavit could testify in the evidentiary hearing scheduled by the State Board of Elections for January 11th, where they'll determine whether or not a new election is needed. McCready's attorneys are arguing that anyone who testifies at the evidentiary hearing should not be granted immunity, but instead be allowed to plead the fifth, and the board should draw, quote, its own logical references from that. Live in the studio, David Hodges, WBTV, on your side.
David, thanks. WBTV is committed to following this investigation as it unfolds. We have updates coming every day. We'll update you on both on air and on WBTV.com as new details come in.
Many of
WBTV investigation is uncovering new information in Bladen County, this time about a political organization funded almost entirely by Democrats. After digging through records, we found some candidates were not reporting their donations to a political group that's previously been accused of illegally collecting ballots. Investigative reporter David Hodges dug through that paperwork. He joins us now in the studio. David?
Alex, the Bladen County Improvement Association shows it took thousands of dollars from candidates in this year's election and in previous races, but I found those contributions haven't always been disclosed by the campaigns who gave that money, and one candidate this year says he gave the group money for one thing, while the organization says it did another.
I'm a little bitter tonight.
At a Bladen County town hall last month, sheriff candidate and Democrat Hakeem Brown vented his frustration about his November election loss.
It's one thing to lose when it's fairly done.
Brown questioned the tactics of his opponent in this year's election, but WBTV has uncovered records that raise questions about the relationship between his campaign and a group called the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC. Finance reports filed by the Improvement PAC show
Breaking tonight, a WBTV investigation has uncovered new information showing the North Carolina State Board member whose complaints led to the 9th congressional district race not being certified was talking regularly with a Bladen County Democrat. They had discussed concerns with the 2018 election. Our chief investigative reporter, Nick Oxner, has been demanding records of communication between the two men for nearly a month now. He's in Raleigh to break down what this could mean.
Josh Malcolm was most recently the chairman of the North Carolina State Board of Elections until it was resolved by a court last week. Before that, he was vice chairman when, in November, he made a motion to not certify the results of the 9th congressional district race, citing unfortunate activities in Bladen and Robeson County, where he's from. Well, new public records show that Malcolm had been in touch with a Democrat in Bladen County from the County Board of Elections named Jens Lutz. These text messages and phone records detail more than a dozen conversations between Josh Malcolm and Jens Lutz, a Democrat who served on the Bladen County Board of Elections until his sudden resignation in early December, and who also used to own an election consulting business with McCrae Dallas, a Bladen County political consultant who's among those at the center of allegations of election fraud in Bladen and Robeson counties. The messages show Lutz contacted Malcolm about concerns multiple times, and at least once, Malcolm told Lutz to call the chief investigator at the State Board of Elections. But even after that, call records produced by Malcolm in response to multiple requests from WBTV show the two talked a number of times in the month before the election, including 3 calls from Malcolm to Lutz on November 3rd, 5th, and on Election Day, November 6th. Malcolm refused an interview request to explain what the two men discussed in their phone conversations. A statement issued by staff at the state board said it was commonplace for county board members to communicate with state board members on a variety of issues. And in a text message sent in response to a request for comment, Lutz indicated he was trying to clean up corruption. Now, we know that Lutz also met with investigators from the State Board of Elections days before he resigned from the Bladen County Board back in early December. We also know from people familiar with the ongoing State Board investigation that Lutz is among a large group of people involved at what State Board investigators are probing. For now, reporting in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
We begin with a WBTV investigation prompting action from members of the North Carolina General Assembly who say they may hold hearings to investigate alleged election fraud in the 9th District. We obtained a copy of this letter sent Friday seeking answers from the former chairman of the State Board of Elections about communication he had with Bladen County Democrat who was emerged as a figure in the investigation. Now, that letter was sent by 2 members of the state Senate, including Gaston County Senator Kathy Harrington. It comes just 1 day after WBTV first revealed the 2 men had frequent contact in the days leading up to this year's election. You can read that letter and more of our original investigation right now on WBTV.com.
New tonight, a WBTV investigation has unearthed hundreds of pages of documents that could be crucial to helping answer questions about absentee ballots in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. The North Carolina State Board of Elections refused to certify the results of that election back in November after allegations of an illegal ballot harvesting operation carried out by a contractor for Republican Mark Harris's campaign. Harris won the race over Democrat Dan McCready by 905 votes. Now, WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner has exclusively obtained documents showing who that contractor for Harris targeted to vote. Nick joins us now live to explain what he found and what it tells us. Nick?
Yeah, Jamie, the contractor who worked on the Harris campaigns named McCray Dallas. He kept copies of each of the more than 500 absentee ballot request forms he turned in for the 2018 election. We got those forms and dug through election data to determine who Dallas targeted and how many of those people voted or didn't. In the week since the North Carolina State Board of Elections voted to not certify the 9th Congressional District race, affidavits have been filed by the North Carolina Democratic Party and lawyers for Dan McCready, where Bladen County voters detailed irregularities largely revolving around absentee ballots. The affidavits have been used to suggest Republican Mark Harris, through a campaign contractor named McCray Dallas, ran an illegal ballot harvesting operation. We dug through hundreds of pages of absentee ballot request forms submitted by Dallas, with people his operation wanted to vote. We sorted the list of people targeted by Dallas by people who got an absentee ballot and didn't vote at all, those who cast an absentee ballot, and those who voted in person. 198 people on Dallas's list didn't vote at all, 38% of all active registered voters on the list. Another 225, or 43%, voted by absentee ballot. That leaves 102 people, or 19%, who voted in person during early voting or on Election Day. But the data helps answer other questions raised so far during the 9th District investigation. Lawyers for McCready filed 13 affidavits total with the North Carolina State Board of Elections. 2 voters, Douglas Bullard and Lonnie Bullard, say they found absentee ballot request forms filed in their name, despite telling a woman named Lisa Britt, who worked for Dallas, they didn't want to request one. We spoke exclusively with Britt in December.
We really weren't doing wrong in the event. Not to my knowledge, we weren't doing anything wrong.
Do you think there was fraud in the 9th Congressional District election?
No, sir.
Do you think there should be a new election?
Personally, no, because I don't feel that there should be, because I think that the election was won by Mr. Harris.
7 of the people who filed affidavits don't appear on Dallas's list at all, which means they could have been targeted by other groups identified by WBTV in Bladen and Robeson counties that operated Get Out the Vote campaigns that may have conflicted with the law. Now, although this new universe of data provides a detailed look at hundreds of voters we know were targeted by Dallas, it's possible his staff sought to encourage other people to vote too. We've posted our raw data online with our web story detailing our findings at WBTV.com. Guys, back to you.
A new poll shows nearly half of North Carolina voters think there should be another election in the 9th District congressional race. The latest public policy polling survey found 48% of voters want a new election. 28% think Harris was the rightful winner. The other 24% weren't sure. Now, we should note that public policy polling is a Democratic polling firm. Now, the state still has not certified a winner in that race between Dan McCready and Mark Harris.
And tonight, more digging from our WBTV Investigates team has uncovered new questions about the facts surrounding affidavits filed by McCready's campaign alleging voter irregularities. Well, Chief Investigative Reporter Nick Oxner joins us live in Raleigh with what he's uncovered. Nick?
Yeah, Maureen, one of those affidavits was filed by a man named Christopher Eason, who says he gave his blank
unsealed ballot to a man named McCrae Dallas, who worked as a contractor for Republican Mark Harris's campaign. But new records we obtained from the Bladen County Board of Elections shows Eason's sister, Ginger, actually turned his ballot in to the Board of Elections. This is now one of 2 ballot affidavits that have come under scrutiny as we begin to uncover more information. The Bladen County Board of Elections kept a log of every absentee ballot that was brought into its office in the 2018 election. It totals about 40 pages, and among the ballots returned is Christopher Eason's. The log shows his ballot was returned by his sister, and that raises new questions about who, if anyone, marked his ballot and how it came to arrive at the Bladen County Board of Elections. Eason gave this affidavit to attorneys for Dan McCready's campaign. It says he signed his blank, unsealed ballot and gave it to McCrae Dallas, a contractor for Mark Harris's campaign, who's accused of running an absentee ballot harvesting operation. But Dallas didn't return the ballot, and he's not one of the 2 witnesses on the form.
And I gave it to her. It wasn't filled out.
Satire Redemar also filed an affidavit with McCready's campaign saying she got an absentee ballot she didn't ask for. She said the same thing at a town hall held last month in Bladen County. But WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges showed Redemar her request form off camera, and she said she recognized the handwriting and the signature on the form as hers. Now, I took our new findings about these affidavits to an attorney familiar with the filing made by McCready's campaign, who knows about these affidavits, he points out. He says that nothing we've found calls into question the veracity or the truthfulness of what is actually said in these affidavits. He also pointed out that McCrae Dallas was convicted of fraud in the early 90s. From now reporting live in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
All right, Nick, and WBTV's investigative team is committed to uncovering new details in this elections fraud investigation. You can see all of our complete reporting on WBTV.com. New at 6 o'clock, a WBTV investigation has uncovered more new information as we continue to dig into voting irregularities in Bladen County.
Yeah, this time we found a man who died before Election Day, but whose vote was still counted. WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner explains what he's found.
James Purdy was 79 when he died on the morning of October 30th, but that didn't keep his absentee ballot from being counted by the Bladen County Board of Elections, even though it shouldn't have been. This is the absentee ballot cover for the vote cast by James Purdy in Bladen County in the 2018 general election. The problem? Purdy died roughly a week before Election Day. His death certificate shows he died at 7:30 on the morning of October 30th. His cause of death includes a respiratory condition that slowly stopped his breathing. His death wasn't sudden. His ballot cover shows his vote was cast the day before his death. Even though the date line is blank on his voter signature, the 2 witness signatures are dated October 29th. The postmark on Purdy's ballot is October 30th, the day he died. It's not clear who put the ballot in the mail.
The requirement to vote is based on Election Day. So if you're no longer alive before Election Day, then you technically would not be qualified to vote.
Pat Gannon is a spokesman for the North Carolina State Board of Elections.
It's kind of on the honor system. If there is a protest lodged with the county or a challenge to a voter, that could be uncovered that way.
There was no challenge over Purdy's vote, likely because it happened so close to Election Day. WBTV discovered Purdy's vote when we ran an analysis of absentee ballots cast versus the Bladen County voter file. Purdy lived in the 7th Congressional District, not the 9th. The 2 women who witnessed Purdy's ballot, Lola Wooten and Sandra Gines, were paid for election work in 2018 by the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC, a group that received thousands of dollars from the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates in the days and months before Election Day.
If they filled it out before and had it witnessed before, it could be sent in by a near relative.
But it's still not supposed to count.
That's correct.
Now, I reached out to an attorney who's previously spoken on behalf of Lola Wooten and the Bladen County Improvement Association PAC, but didn't receive a response. This new revelation comes less than a week before the North Carolina State Board of Elections will publicly hear evidence collected by board investigators of voting irregularities in Bladen and Gaston counties. Coming up on WBTV News in prime time at 7, I'll look at the closing arguments being made by both the Harris and McCready campaigns as to why the 9th District race should or shouldn't be certified. Guys, back to you.
WBTV News starts right now with breaking news.
It's become clear to me
that the public's confidence in the 9th District seat general election has been undermined to an extent that a new election is warranted.
Mark Harris calling for a new election for North Carolina's 9th District congressional seat.
And I believe the people of North Carolina deserve a fair election.
The Board of Elections unanimously votes in favor of that new election. We're live and on your side with team coverage tonight from Raleigh. Good evening, glad you're with us. I'm Jamie Bowl.
And I'm Maureen O'Boyle. The investigation into the NC-09 congressional election is a scandal that's left many of you without representation in Washington for months.
Well, now you will get another chance to cast a ballot. Chief Investigative Reporter Nick Oxner begins our team coverage live from Raleigh. Nick?
Yeah, Jamie, Maureen, this certainly came as a shock, the announcement from Mark Harris that he believes a new election is warranted in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District came on day 4 of an evidentiary hearing into the investigation that had already heard detailed claims of alleged crimes being committed by a contractor who was hired by Harris to collect absentee ballots in Bladen County. Before Harris made his announcement, though, he spent the afternoon on the stand in a sequence of events that continued to build up and make it clear and evident that board members were skeptical and had questions of their own. Here's just a quick sequence of events that led up to his announcement.
So I guess the question I just have to ask that I did not want to ask, you just wanted to win.
Neither I nor any of the leadership of my campaign were aware of or condoned the improper activities that have been testified to in this hearing. Through the testimony I've listened to over the past 3 days, I believe a new election should be called. It's become clear to me that the public's confidence in the 9th District seat general election has been undermined to an extent that a new election is warranted.
Is this how you expected this to end today?
No, this is not how I expected it to end today. I mean, honestly, most of what's happened in the last few days was unexpected.
So there you have it. That's a quick snapshot of what we had just today. I'm joined by investigative reporter David Hodges. David, you have been taking a look this afternoon on what these developments, what the new election being called for officially means moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of major questions with that, specifically about what Dr. Mark Harris' involvement might be. I tried catching up with him after the hearing to try and ask these important questions. Dr. Harris, I have to ask you, did you intentionally lie to the people of North Carolina?
No, sir.
Why are you calling for this now?
We'll talk later. I made my statement.
While Mark Harris promises to talk later, voters in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District can expect action soon.
They're going to get a new election, and hopefully there's not going to be what my son would call the shenanigans going on.
North Carolina Elections Board Chair Bob Cordell says he's not sure what the timeline is for a new election, but expects board staff to report to them next week. Many questions surround now whether Mark Harris will run in the new election and whether his name is required to be on the ballot by law.
I don't know. I think it's true. Dr. Harris has been sick, seriously sick.
We've reached out to Democrat Dan McCready for a statement. He sent this tweet and statement to us from the moment the first vote was stolen in North Carolina, from the moment the first voice was silenced by election fraud, that people have deserved justice. Today was a great step forward for democracy in North Carolina. We'll learn more details about the election in the coming weeks, and there's still many questions about what's next in the criminal investigation. You can count on WBTV to keep continuing to follow these developments as they happen in the 9th Congressional District investigation. Live in Raleigh, David Hodges, WBTV, on your side.
David, thank you so much. Our coverage of this ongoing investigation continues. So many questions left to be answered. You can see Harris's full testimony and a full timeline of that hearing on WBTV.com/NC9. We've uncovered new developments in the criminal investigation into allegations of election fraud in the 9th Congressional District.
Yeah, this comes just one day after the North Carolina State Board of Elections voted unanimously to hold a new election in the district. Now, WBTV's chief investigative reporter, Nick Oxner, has uncovered court records that give the first clues as to what criminal investigators are now looking at. Nick has more from Bladen County.
Yesterday, Mark Harris testified that he first met McCrae Dallas at a meeting with Bladen County political leaders here at Ray's Furniture in April of 2017. Fast forward 2 years, that meeting has led to a new election in the 9th Congressional District and an ongoing criminal investigation. These court records from Wake County show District Attorney Lauren Freeman and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation have obtained information about McCrae Dowless as part of their investigation into election fraud in Bladen County. Dowless was hired by Republican Mark Harris to work on his campaign for Congress. Specifically, the records show SBI agents have executed a search warrant for bank records listed as being related to Dowless this past December, and in January, a warrant for a cell phone number used by Dowless. Freeman asked the judge to keep details of the warrants secret. But news of the warrants come just one day after a State Board of Elections hearing concluded, where witnesses testified they were directed by Dowless to illegally fill out people's absentee ballots and at other times forge witness signatures.
I said, McCrae, I'm going to tell you just like if you were my son. If you've done something wrong, step up and accept the consequences and deal with it.
Do you think there was wrongdoing by the part of McCrae Dowless or people who worked for him, as has been alleged this week?
I tell you, I'm just like everybody else. I heard a lot of testimony. I questioned some of the people that testified.
Ray Britt is a Bladen County commissioner and among a group of local political leaders that first met with Mark Harris to suggest he hire Dowless for his 2018 campaign. Did anyone in that meeting that was here in your store express some concerns about McCrae Dowless there?
Not a one. For him to take a hit like that, it was devastating to me.
Britt's name came up repeatedly over the 3.5-day state board hearing, including on Thursday, when state board staff pointed out that a check written by the Harris campaign consultant to Dowless had been endorsed to Britt. Why did McCrae Dowless endorse that check to you?
He received it from Mr. Harris, so he had to have it cashed. And so I've got to sign it, either deposit or in my checking account or my business's account. But he really missed something. There was probably 2 or 3.
And so it was regular for him to come cash checks?
Yes, sir. You got one you need cashing this morning?
And District Attorney Lauren Freeman has previously said her investigation should be finished in 1 to 2 months, which means we should likely know whether or not she will file criminal charges as a result of the 9th District investigation before any new election is held in that congressional contest. Reporting in Elizabethtown, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Nick, thank you. Now, as for the new election, tonight we know Democrat Dan McCready will run again to represent the 9th District. This coming a day after the State Board of Elections ordered the new election. McCready was asked about the idea of possibly facing off once again against Mark Harris and if Harris should be allowed to run again. Here's what he had to say.
We live in a democracy. Ultimately, that's a question for the people to decide. I think certainly being on the ballot, he is going to need to ask for forgiveness from the voters.
Mark Harris has still not said if he plans to run again for the seat. Former Mecklenburg County Commissioner Matthew Ridenhour and former Union County Senator Tommy Tucker both say they are strongly considering entering the
New tonight, Democrat Dan McCready says he has not worked with a political group that also faced accusations of elections violations during the 9th Congressional District hearings.
Yeah, last week, the board voted for a new election after investigators detailed evidence of election fraud allegedly orchestrated by McCrae Dowless. WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges digging more now into the Bladen County Improvement Association and whether they'll have any involvement in this upcoming election. David?
Yeah, we forwarded that question to Dan McCready to ask him what his take is on that. The Bladen County Improvement Association, as it's often called, was investigated in 2016, and board members found that the organization may have given improper assistance to voters by writing in the names of candidates on absentee ballots. The organization flat out denies being involved in absentee ballot programs this time around, but some of their members clearly were. You heard it from the Elections Board Executive Director.
Associated with the Bladen County Improvement Association.
From witnesses.
The Bladen County Improvement Association were his rivals.
And from a board member.
Of the Bladen County Improvement Association and how they added to the chaos created during the 2008 elections.
But what is the Bladen County Improvement Association? It's a get out the vote effort focusing on African American candidates, partially funded by the North Carolina Democratic Party and covered before by WBTV Investigates. During the NC-09 hearing, an election worker for McCrae Dowless said that 2 members of the effort, including President Horace Munn, were seen at Dallas's home copying absentee ballot applications. In a statement, the attorney for the Improvement Association said that the testimony was a deliberate lie. But records from the Board of Elections office show 3 members of the Improvement Association turned in a total of 458 absentee ballot applications before the 2018 election. The PAC's attorney said individual members of the Bladen County community may have engaged in absentee balloting efforts in their individual capacities on behalf of family members, friends, and associates, but those activities were not tied to the electoral activities of the Bladen County Improvement Association. The board did not present any evidence that PAC members were illegally collecting absentee ballots in the 2018 election, but WBTV interviewed a couple of people who said that PAC members did pick up their absentee ballots.
I've not worked with them.
While campaign finance records show he has not donated to them before, we asked Dan McCready if he planned on working with the group for the next election.
It's not something I've thought about. I have not really worked with them.
McCready went on to say that both Republicans and Democrats should be held accountable for conducting election fraud. I also got a statement from the North Carolina Democratic Party. They said since this organization did not have any allegations of wrongdoing against it in the hearings, they will continue to support similar civil rights get out the vote organizations. Maureen, James.
Breaking news tonight, he is out. Republican Mark Harris says he will not be running in the new 9th District congressional election. Harris announced earlier this afternoon that he is dropping out of the race. The decision comes just days after he and the state called for a new election. Now, the new election comes after allegations of election fraud in the 9th Congressional District. This is an ongoing investigation we have been following closely for you. Now, WBTV has unearthed important new information. The president of a Bladen County Get Out the Vote group with ties to the Democratic Party says he was tipped off about an investigation into voting irregularities before last year's election. Investigative reporter David Hodges joins us to tell us what he's learned. David?
Jamie, Horace Munn is the president of the Bladen County Improvement Association. He says he was tipped off about a coming investigation into a Republican political operative who worked for Mark Harris in last year's election. As a result, he tells me he instructed members of his organization to not promote absentee ballots, even though they had in the past.
Do you see him in this room?
It didn't take long during the 9th Congressional District hearings held by the North Carolina State Board of Elections for Horace Munn to get pushed into the spotlight.
That's the person you saw that would deliver requests to your office as you made copies. Yes, ma'am.
One of McCrae Dallas's election workers, Lisa Britt, said she saw Munn at McCrae Dallas office making copies of absentee ballot request forms. But Munn tells WBTV her testimony is a flat-out lie. In a phone conversation Monday night, Munn said that before the 2018 primary, he was tipped off that the North Carolina State Board of Elections would be investigating McCrae Dallas and absentee ballot programs in Bladen County. Dallas was hired by Republican Mark Harris to run an absentee ballot operation and other get-out-the-vote efforts. Because of the tip, Munn said he told members of his organization, "We are not doing an absentee ballot program this year." He also said he called NCSBE Chief Investigator Joan Fleming before the election and said, "I know he's doing stuff illegally, and to keep my organization clean, we will not participate in an absentee ballot program." Munn said he hasn't dealt with McCrae Dallas in years and feels that the board set him up to make it appear both Democrats and Republicans were violating election laws. He said investigators hauled me upstairs like a piece of meat just to point me out. While at least 3 people paid by the Improvement Association for Get Out the Vote efforts turned in more than 400 absentee ballot applications before the general election, Munn says they were acting as individuals and not representing his organization, and that they did not pay them for absentee ballot application efforts. Munn would not say who tipped him off about the NCSBE investigation. A spokesperson for the State Board of Elections declined to answer most of our questions, citing the ongoing criminal investigation, but in an email said State Board staff believes that the evidence presented in Raleigh last week will serve as a reminder that this agency will not tolerate efforts to defraud the electoral system in North Carolina. Our agency will support all prosecutorial efforts by the Wake County District Attorney. Maureen, back to you.
Republican Mark Harris says he is dropping out of the race for North Carolina's 9th Congressional District. Harris made it official just a few hours ago.
That decision comes just days after he and the state called for a new election. All new tonight, our chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner is breaking down the decision and what it means for the new upcoming election. Nick?
Yeah, Maureen, Jamie, Harris announced his decision on Facebook this afternoon. It comes just days after he stopped his testimony during last week's 9th congressional hearing with the North Carolina State Board of Elections, acknowledged he'd made misstatements under oath and called for a new election. At last week's hearing, he'd attributed his lapse in memory to a serious infection he had in January that triggered 2 strokes. His continued health problems is what Harris cited throughout today's statement, announcing he wouldn't run in the new election too. But Harris did endorse another candidate, throwing his support behind Republican Union County Commissioner Stoney Rushing. Rushing's been actively following the 9th District investigation and was in Raleigh for last week's hearing. It's expected he'll face opposition in the Republican primary for the seat, including from former Union County State Senator Tommy Tucker. Now, last week on his way out of the hearing, Harris told our David Hodges that he hadn't lied to voters in North Carolina, but outside of that one statement, he has yet to make any public statements on camera. Guys, back to you.
All right, Nick Ochsner, thank you. Governor Roy Cooper commenting on the NC-09 investigation. He says the allegations of absentee ballot fraud were disturbing. He was asked if the move to hold a new election was the right one.
But I think people deserve to have an election that they can trust, and I think the board made the right call in calling for a new election and look forward to getting that on the schedule soon.
So far, Dan McCready has already announced he will run again for North Carolina's 9th district, but it's still unclear if he'll face any opponent in the primary. Mark Harris announced he is endorsing Union County Commissioner Stoney Rushing, as we just heard, for the spot. Meanwhile, former Charlotte City Councilman Kenny Smith, Union County GOP Chairman Dan Barry, and former Mecklenburg County Commissioner Matthew Ridenour have all been mentioned as possible contenders. Yesterday, we told you former North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory said he will not run, instead focusing on running for governor in 2020 or the U.S. Senate in 2022. Also breaking tonight, McCrae Dowless is now out on bond a day after he was arrested for election-related crimes. His charges stem from activities in the 2016 and 2018 primaries, similar to those now under investigation in the 9th Congressional District. Our chief investigative reporter Nick Ochsner talked to Dowless exclusively upon his release.
Well, McCrae Dowless walked through these doors a little after 2:30 this afternoon. After spending the night here at the Wake County Detention Center, he was arrested yesterday and charged with multiple felonies, including obstruction of justice and possession of an absentee ballot. We were able to talk with Dowless on the condition that we could only ask him 2 questions. We made the agreement with his lawyer prior to the interview. Specifically, we asked what his reaction was to the number of allegations that have been made against him, both in the indictments that came down this week, as well as in testimony before the North Carolina State Board of Elections last week, where a woman who described herself as Dowless's stepdaughter, who was also an employee of Dowless's in the 2018 election, accused him of directing his employees to collect absentee ballots, forge witness signatures, and even fill out some blank absentee ballots. Here's what he had to say. So did you expect the police to come knock on your door and take you to jail yesterday?
No, sir.
There have been a lot of people who have accused you of a lot of crimes in the last week and a half, including people last week, the district attorney now. What do you have to say to that?
The truth will prevail on it all.
Well, anything else you want to say to the folks in Bladen County?
No comment.
The Wake County District Attorney tells me today that she doesn't expect other charges to stem from the 2016 investigation that prompted Dowless's arrest yesterday, but she has made clear the criminal investigation until the 2018 election remains ongoing. For now, reporting in Raleigh, Nick Ochsner, WBTV, on your side.
All right, Nick, thank you. Right now, investigators are still searching for the 4 other people indicted in addition to McCrae Dowless. The State Bureau of Investigation says they have not been arrested yet, and police have been trying to get in touch with them. WBTV investigative reporter David Hodges spent the day trying to track them down as well. He continues our team coverage live in Bladen County. So, David, tell us more about the role they are said to have played in Dowless's absentee ballot program.
Jamie, I got some insight from the mother of one woman now facing charges. She says she was involved in McCrae Dowless's 2016 absentee ballot program. The mother told me that her daughter would pick up mail-in absentee ballots that Dowless told her to, and she says at the time her daughter claimed she did not even know it was illegal. Door after door, WBTV Investigates tried tracking down the 4 people now facing felony charges of conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice and possession of an absentee ballot. At the apartment of Rebecca Thompson, one of the defendants, we learn more about why she's facing those charges.
Where the police need to go get her, though, because she got a lot of people up out here.
Robert Montgomery lives in the Village Oaks apartments, which had some of the highest rates of requests for absentee ballots in the 2018 primary. It's also where Rebecca Thompson lives. Montgomery says she had him fill out a form she said was for supporting beer and wine sales in Bladenboro. A few days later, he says he got a letter in the mail from the Bladen County Board of Elections. He never even opened it.
The letter came, so I gave it to her.
He says when he tried voting at the Elizabethtown Library later that year, he was told he couldn't.
And they say I can't vote because somebody signed me up for a Republican. And no, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Democrat.
State Board of Elections records show Montgomery has historically voted early, in person, and in primaries as a Democrat. But during the 2018 primary, he voted absentee mail and a Republican ballot. His ballot envelope was signed and witnessed by Rebecca Thompson. Hello, Ms. Thompson. We didn't find Rebecca Thompson or any of the other defendants. At the address for Caitlin Kroom, I spoke with her mother, who told me that Kroom is currently in rehab. She says she wasn't even aware her daughter was charged with a crime. She says McCrae Dallas told her daughter she would get paid for however many ballots she delivered. Regarding her daughter being indicted, she said, "I don't think that's fair because they didn't know it was illegal." I spoke with one other woman at the apartment where Rebecca Thompson lives. She tells me that yesterday she saw plainclothes police officers knocking on Thompson's door, but they did not walk away with anyone. We still have not received any updates from local police or from the State Bureau of Investigations that those 4 others indicted have been arrested. Live in Bladen County, David Hodges, WBTV, on your side.
Great work out there, David, as always. New at 6 o'clock, we're hearing from the Bladen County Commissioner who delivered the check to bond out McCrae Dowless. Ray Britt says he and others want to clear Bladen County's name and get to the truth.
It's time that Mr. Hammond and myself and others get a chance to speak to redeem Bladen County and its citizens. So I'm here today on behalf of those that believe in a true process.
And you can count on WBTV for continuing coverage of this election fraud investigation. For in-depth articles, exclusive interviews, and the latest developments, visit WBTV.com/NC-09.
One of its coaches.
But first, we continue to follow breaking news today as federal prosecutors with the U.S. Department of Justice opened their own investigation into the 9th Congressional District. Good to have you here at 6 o'clock. I'm Maureen O'Boyle.
And I'm Jamie Bull. This move comes weeks after the North Carolina State Board of Elections voted to hold a new election in the 9th District. And after a key figure at the center of the investigation was indicted on state charges. WBTV's chief investigative reporter Nick Oxner broke news of this federal investigation last night on WBTV.com. He joins us now to explain what this all means going forward. Nick?
Yeah, Jamie, Maureen, the investigation is being headed by attorneys with the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., not federal prosecutors in North Carolina, which would typically be the case. I spoke with one local federal defense attorney to explain what that might mean for this investigation. This grand jury subpoena sent to the North Carolina State Board of Elections last week is one of at least 3 issued by attorneys with the U.S. Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section, part of the federal investigation into alleged election fraud in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District.
This is certainly at the start of an investigation, but it would be the first sign that there is an investigation.
Charlotte attorney Brad Smith practices in federal court. He says he's not surprised to hear the investigation, which centers on absentee ballots cast in Bladen and Robeson counties, was being run from an office in Washington, D.C., instead of a local U.S. Attorney's office in North Carolina.
It's not unusual that they would be providing assistance in an election fraud case.
In this case, Smith says, the local U.S. attorney likely recused himself because Mark Harris's son, John, works at the U.S. Attorney's office for the Eastern District. John Harris testified at the State Board of Elections hearing that he suspected McCrae Dowless, who worked for the elder Harris's campaign in 2018, of having previously broken election laws.
That office, I'm going to guess, may be recusing themselves from the investigation, not because there's anything nefarious going on, but just because for appearance sake.
In addition to the State Board of Elections, WBTV's confirmed the Harris campaign and McCrae Dowless himself each also received subpoenas. Now those subpoenas request documents for a grand jury that will be convened in mid-April. We'll continue digging for new information in the 9th District investigation. We'll bring it to you as soon as we find it. Guys, back to you.
We know you will. Nick, thank you.
Breaking news tonight with exclusive information for you. WBTV has learned that federal investigators have issued subpoenas in the investigation into the 9th Congressional District. We've learned the U.S. Department of Justice's Public Integrity Section and the FBI have sent subpoenas to the North Carolina State Board of Elections, to the Mark Harris campaign, and to McCrae Dowless, a campaign operative for Harris. You remember Dowless was indicted 2 weeks ago. That was on charges related to obstructing justice and possessing illegal ballots. These new subpoenas come less than a month after the state board voted unanimously to hold a new election in the 9th Congressional District. We have more information for you, including a copy of the subpoena online right now at WBTV.com.